No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 86. Please click and subscribe to our brand new independent news source. Turn on the notification bell, then you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews and special royal episodes. Today, the Southport Massacre cover-up is now the worst in British history, with new information about the lengths the establishment and mainstream media have gone to shut down discussion emerging by the day. In the past few hours, Nigel Farage has confirmed my exclusive from yesterday that Reform UK was banned from asking about Axel Rudakubana in Parliament. In my digest, I'll slam the MSM, with very few exceptions, for working with the Westminster establishment to hide official information from us about what the Prime Minister knew when. Then my superstar panel, True Conservative Media's Chris Davies and Money Magpie Jasmine Birtles weigh in. Also coming up on the show, after the Ofcommunists fined them £100,000 and GB News tacks further to the mainstream with fawning interviews like this with truly evil figures.
Rachel Reeves, thank you for joining us tonight on GB News. How did it feel being the first female Chancellor ever to do your budget?
I felt a huge pride in being the first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. This role has existed now for 800 years and never a woman has done it. And
Please. So now we learn that Neil Oliver might be the next out the door at the former free speech broadcast. I'll tell you what I know. And a row has broken out within Reform UK over the treatment of Tommy Robinson supporters after Richard Tice said this.
Tommy Robinson, people have been protesting in his name. What do you make of Tommy Robinson? Is he a good guy in your eyes?
No. All of that lot, we have nothing to do with them.
Even the protesters who have got banners up saying two-tier care, you agree with them on the policing and justice?
We agree with ourselves. I'm not aligning ourselves with Tommy Robinson's lot in any shape or form.
Then, in the uncancelled after show, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle under increasing strain ahead of a potential Donald Trump return to the White House. I reveal my original reporting, and then American royal expert and Trump supporter Lee Cohen analyses. You can register to watch at www.outspoken.live. But now, let's go. The cover-up over the Southport Massacre, which saw 3 beautiful young girls bludgeoned to death at a Taylor Swift dance concert by a man who had downloaded Al-Qaeda manuals and was literally producing ricin, is now the worst in British history. We are in truly terrifying times when the mainstream media, which is meant to bash all the authorities and politicians to deliver us, the public, the truth, are now working in cahoots with the establishment to shield information from the public. I am genuinely disgusted by my former colleagues in the MSM, with just a couple of exceptions at the Daily Telegraph and Talk TV, because they have hidden behind completely irrelevant contempt of court laws to fail to hold Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper to account about what they knew when. Yesterday, right here on Outspoken, I revealed that the Speaker had banned Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice from directly asking two-tier care the question that he had planned. He was going to say to him, "Do you think the public are stupid?" Now, that would have been a moment. But knowing that the Speaker appeared to protect the Prime Minister by insisting,
I wish to remind the House that the following horrendous, terrible incident in Southport on the 29th of July, a suspect is awaiting trial, having been charged with multiple offences. That means the House Sub Judice resolution is engaged and references should not be made to the case. I know that all honourable members wish to see justice done in this case. It is therefore of paramount importance that nothing is said in this House which could potentially prejudice a proper trial.
Now, luckily, Richard Tice had a plan B.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall Casey, has said repeatedly recently that it is important in incidents of terrorism that the authorities put out more information sooner in order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates to be the next Tory leader. They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. And I know which side I'm on.
Rachel Blake.
But breaking right now, Nigel Farage has just confirmed the details of my exclusive. He's written in the Daily Telegraph. I want to share quite a lot of it with you, actually, because it's important. This is really important. So Farage writes, as an elected MP, it is my duty to act in the interests of my constituents. That includes asking difficult questions in order to get the truth about national issues. When it comes to the Southport attack, however, it has been extremely difficult to do this job. My faith in the ability of lawmakers to scrutinise responsibly has been badly shaken, as a near-blanket ban on discussing the case has been issued. The Starmer government has been very effective in using fear to shut down public debate that it considers inconvenient. You only need to think back to the almost unprecedented way the state used rapid and harsh sentencing for those involved in the summer riots, including those who wrote unpleasant things online. The overriding view was that the far right, whoever they may be, must be crushed. Then Farage went on. An hour before PMQs began, Richard Tice received a telephone call in which he was told not to ask anything about the man accused of the Southport attacks. This point was reinforced strenuously by the Speaker in the Commons, which we just saw, obviously. Parliamentary privilege was effectively withdrawn. For now, therefore, it seems that nobody is allowed to ask in the proper forum when the government first knew that the accused was to face the ricin and terror material charges. Likewise, nobody can know whether this man was known to the authorities in any way. Do we really want to live in a society where such crucial information is kept from the public? Who decides these details should remain secret? It's incredibly, incredibly important. And I'm so glad that Nigel has raised these issues. But it's equally important that the mainstream media, including Nigel's employer, GB News, doesn't stay in its cone of silence over this whole cover-up. But that's where we're at. Do you know that presenters on the so-called free speech channel have been told not to talk about the Southport cover-up at all? So Farage is writing about it in the Daily Telegraph, but he's not talking about it on GB News. Now that's before you get to the usual suspects, the British Bashing Corporation, Channel 4, Woke ITV, Sly News, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So where were all of the truth-telling journalists who thought hounding Boris Johnson out of office over a piece of birthday cake? Where are they now when we're talking about the most important story in the country? Beth Rigby, Paul Brand, Robert Peston have done absolutely nothing to question those in power about why they deliberately misled the public while accusing those who did pose pertinent questions like Farage of spreading misinformation. Actually, do you know who was spreading misinformation? Yvette Cooper.
Extremely important that people don't spread damaging misinformation online. False information has already been extensively shared in the last 24 hours. Those who do this for their own purposes risk undermining a crucial criminal investigation. And I ask everyone to show some respect for the community in Southport and for families who are grieving and in trauma.
How can our media not have asked that woman about why she lied to us all. And did she lie to us all because she was so desperate to terrorize the public into thinking that they couldn't say anything, they couldn't ask anything, they couldn't attend a protest, because if they did, they could end up like Peter Lynch, dead in jail. Now, our media is just a shameful joke now. Woke ITV decided to allow the bloke Yvette Cooper goes to bed with at night, and sorry, I know it's an awful thought, but he allowed him to question her on Good Morning Britain about the incident, and the Ofcommunists had no problem with it. And let me tell you, that is because they are all in on this together. Listen to the softball questioning from GB News to the evil Chancellor Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Reeves, thank you for joining us tonight on GB News. How did it feel being the first female Chancellor ever to do your budget?
Well, I felt a huge pride in being the first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. This role has existed now for 800 years and never a woman has done it. And just
Who cares? Who cares? She's the government representative. She should have been asked, did you know about Axel Rudakubana downloading Al-Qaeda material? Did you know about Axel Rudakubana producing ricin? If you didn't, did the Prime Minister, did the Home Secretary at least ask the question? Why do we now have a mainstream media that doesn't ask questions of our leaders? Change is urgently required. So I do want to give credit to the only two Conservatives who have been brave enough to tackle this shocking issue. There she is, Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, wrote in the Daily Telegraph, also been very good on this, Yvette Cooper and Sir Keir Starmer need to explain what they knew, when, and also explain their subsequent approach to the protests that took place at the time, as they were the ones who did not come to Parliament or address the legitimate questions people were asking. Amen, Priti Patel. Now, that story should have been leading the British Bashing Corporation News, GB News, ITV News, Channel 4 News, Sly News last night. There wasn't a word of it. Honestly, I watched. Not a word of it. Also credit to Robert Jenrick, who I truly hope is elected Tory leader tomorrow, because he came here to call out the disgraceful MSM coverage of Southport.
I don't want people to be calling out incidents, squeamishly or selectively, as we saw earlier in the summer. In fact, I want the media to be able to speak about these things much more openly than they are today. I'm worried that we are sliding into the position that we see in some other European countries like Germany, where there is censorship, either by regulation or self-censorship, and serious crimes that are being committed, for example, by illegal migrants on the streets, are not being covered properly out of fear for community tensions and community cohesion issues. That is wrong.
Totally.
And we need to be ensuring that our media are calling out what is happening, no veil of secrecy being drawn over what's happening on our own streets. That is letting the British public down.
Yeah, he's completely right. But as I've just outlined, there is literally a veil of secrecy being drawn about what happened with Axel Rudakubana. So all we can do is not shut up about this. And obviously we don't want to prejudice a trial, but nothing I've said is going to prejudice a trial. Nothing Nigel Farage or Alison Pearson has written about in the Daily Telegraph, or Douglas Murray has written about in The Spectator, is going to prejudice a trial. So this is a choice. It is a choice that is now being made by journalists, by politicians, and by the authorities not to talk about something, and you have to question why. Because this is a matter of national security, and asking what our Prime Minister and Home Secretary knew crosses no lines. My other piece of advice today: switch off the media organisations not brave enough to tackle the most important issue facing our troubled United Kingdom. Now, the Superstar panel. And I'm delighted to be joined this Friday by Jasmine Birtles. She is, of course, an independent journalist and the brains behind the brilliant Money Magpie. And Chris Davies, who is the founder of True Conservative Media. Chris, I've just had it. I have had it. I'm so angry this week. And I'm so angry to see these mainstream journalists in front of politicians like Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer, numerous other cabinet ministers, and they haven't even asked the question. Why not just ask the question, Chris?
Are we really surprised, though, Dan? That's probably the more pertinent question.
No.
You know, and I know, a veil of secrecy has been pulled over this. It's about as thin as gossamer. But the reality is they just don't want to talk about it. They're all in on it together. You're absolutely right. The establishment, the mainstream media, the Speaker of the House of Commons, and obviously the Labour leadership. I thought the piece that Priti Patel wrote was very instructive. As a former Home Secretary, she, of course, would know about anything that's going to happen like this. Very, very early on in the piece, she would be made aware of ricin, she'd be made aware of an Al-Qaeda training manual when she was in post. And for Yvette Cooper and the Prime Minister to suggest that they were not aware at an early stage is frankly a falsehood.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Jasmine Birtles, great to have you, but that's the point, isn't it? Priti Patel, she knows. She was the Home Secretary. She was literally in post when she was dealing with situations like this with the police, and she has said there is no way Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer did not know.
Yes, the whole thing has been weird from the very start, because right at the beginning, we found out that the perpetrator had worked for the BBC in a sort of acting kind of role. And I have to say, that reminded me of COVID, when ITV and I think also BBC, and, as you say, Sly News, used crisis actors to pretend to be COVID victims in hospital. And there's just something very weird about the connection between BBC acting, I think it was in a Doctor Who or something like that, and now, as we find out, not only a killer, but somebody who is wanting to destroy the country. It's very odd.
And there are so many examples now of official cover-ups, which people in the media just turn a blind eye to. So Reform UK have actually written a letter direct to the Prime Minister today. Isn't it incredible, by the way, that Reform UK are doing all of these things? Hopefully, if Robert Jenrick is elected tomorrow, the Conservative Party will start doing some of these things too. But the Reform UK, all of their 5 MPs have written to the Prime Minister saying the overwhelming majority of ordinary people want to end the deliberate policy of mass, uncontrolled illegal immigration and regain control over legal immigration. This is causing a national crisis with public trust in politics and the system collapsing. We are writing to you because this crisis has been made worse by the fact that information has been withheld or deliberately concealed from the British public, while other governments across Europe and elsewhere are collecting and making more data available on the impact of immigration. Government departments in the UK appear to be publishing less. Why is this? And Chris Davies, we know why, because actually they think if we don't know the truth, if we don't know the figures, they are going to pull the wool over our eyes and we're not going to realise what's happening to our country.
Dan, this is part of what Mark Stein would call the great shut up.
Yes.
It's just the latest example of something that ordinary people don't need to know about. The government knows best, and you, Prole, get back in your box, go to work, live in your rented house, don't own anything, and be happy with what you've got. This is the approach that Labour are taking. It is at best authoritarian, bordering on totalitarian. It is designed specifically to oppress and suppress free speech. They don't want to talk about it, and therefore they don't want you to talk about it.
Yeah, they don't want us to know, do they, Jasmine?
No, absolutely. And Dan, you know, the immigration issue, I mean, it's not just in this country, as we know, it's across the West, particularly, I mean, in America, they've got it in bags. But from an economic point of view, the governments let in as many as they like in order, firstly, to make the GDP figures, the gross domestic product figures, look better, because the more heads you have to count, the higher your gross domestic product looks. But also, I was speaking to a former MP just a few weeks ago, and he told me that a former chancellor said to him that all we need to do is build lots of buildings and then bring lots of people in, and that'll keep the price of property up, it'll keep the rents high as well. And hey, it's worked. Isn't that just marvelous? Isn't that fantastic for our well-being? Because although the GDP figures, the sort of top line figures, make it look like we're doing well or we're not doing as bad as we were, individually, we are, as individuals, we all have a smaller slice of the pie as more people come in and don't contribute. Those that contribute, absolutely fine, not a problem. They're helping the economy on the whole. But for the rest, they're just reducing the slice of the pie that most individuals in this country have. So increasingly, we are feeling poorer because we are, frankly.
We are.
No, Jasmine's bang on there, Dan. GDP per capita is falling. Yes, GDP overall might be increasing, but the more people you bring in to have the same effectively slice of pie, the actual individual wealth is dropping. But we don't want to talk about that, do we?
The invasion of the UK continues at pace, though. And we have now seen over the past 24 hours the completely egregious nature of how scumbag criminals, the lowest of the low, people who are literally setting out to come here and murder and torture and take out civilians and politicians, will get in with no trouble because the entire system has broken down. I'm referring, of course, to Madder Hasser. There he is. Remember him? He's got the Kalashnikov on his, tattooed on his cheek. Apparently responsible for loads of crimes in Sweden, and he has been taunting Nigel Farage for some time, including making a threat against his life. Well, he did arrive. He arrived in the UK. So despite the fact that this guy, here he is on one of the boats, by the way, and despite the fact that this guy had signposted the fact that he wanted to come, had made a big deal about the fact that he was coming to try and kill Farage, he still got in, which is just totally extraordinary. Now, Nigel Farage wrote on this Madder Hasser, the migrant who has threatened to kill me, has now crossed the English Channel, according to this video. Is this the kind of man we really want in Britain? Later, he said, I am pleased that this individual has now been detained, but appalled that a migrant who threatened to kill me was escorted into British waters by the French Navy. And again, and I am going to keep pointing this out, Chris Davies, nothing from the mainstream media. Sly News didn't even feel this was a story worthy of covering. Now, can we just imagine, Chris, for a second, that a far-right terrorist decided to illegally enter the country, having threatened to kill Keir Starmer, that it would not be leading every single news bulletin in the country. But for some reason, when the threat is from an Islamic terrorist and the person being threatened is Nigel Farage, a bit like Donald Trump in America, it's almost accepted. This is astonishing.
Where do we go with our two tiers, Dan? I think our two-tier lexicon is rapidly running out of space. It's absurd, of course. And I wonder whether or not this may get Nigel off the fence on the subject of deportations, because this notion that our southern border is completely porous and that anybody can get in, and they are coming with increasing ferocity. The numbers, as you know, are already ahead of last year's. It needs attention, it needs urgent attention, but it's not going to happen. Labour have got no interest. As Jasmine said earlier on, the overall GDP grows because more heads are coming through the door. I think it's now 7 billion a week, is it, the hotel? No, 7 billion annually, rather, the hotel bill for all of these migrants. There is no interest in stopping this from happening. Contrast the awful thing that happened to Joe Cox with the threats against Farage. What did Farage have to do? He had to beef up his security. But nobody is interested in Nigel Farage, and Reform need to remember that if they want to become part of the establishment will never accept them. The broadcast mainstream media will never accept them. They would be better off being radical, insisting on deport and detain and getting these people out of our country.
Well, this is why, Jasmine, I just hope and pray that the Conservative Party membership have done the right thing and elected Robert Jenrick tomorrow, because I know the Tories are a mess, right? I completely understand that. But it's about moving the Overton window. And I quizzed Jenrick directly here earlier this week, and he vowed to the Outspoken family, he made a solemn promise that he was absolutely serious about deporting every single one of the million people that are here illegally. Now, that's the sort of conviction that we need, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with the Conservatives, what they need to do is start being Conservatives. Crazy idea, but they were for a few years trying to be partly Conservatives, partly Socialists. And certainly they were being very nitpicky, sort of pussyfooting around the idea of dealing with migrants, particularly, obviously, the illegal migrants. And I'm told that the cabinet knew that the Rwanda idea would not work. So you would have thought that they would have done something early on. But I think the mood of the country now, from people who are Conservative voters, Reform voters, Labour voters, is increasingly that they are very worried about, as you say, all sorts of illegal migrants who may have all kinds of backgrounds. Many of them will be great, but many of them will also be the sort of people that nobody would want in their countries. And I think also it would be really helpful for the legacy media, firstly, to be honest about the situation with illegal migrants coming into the country, because they're really not. Same with the civil service, which, as you know, has now stopped giving the actual breakdown of nationalities when it comes to reporting crimes, etc. So we don't know where which nationalities are doing which crimes. So they need to be honest. But also we need to be clear about the international push to just bring migrants into all kinds of countries. The UN has a specific agenda to bring people from poorer countries into the richer countries. And, they're talking about making it all equal. Well, basically, that means making the richer countries poor. That's essentially what it's about. And that is what people are feeling. And that's why the anger will continue to grow if the Labour Party does nothing. And I suspect that they won't. I mean, they've said that they will, but I doubt if they will.
Well, they've got no way to do it. That's the problem. And that is why this letter from Nigel Farage and backed by Matt Goodwin, I think, is really important, because when you look at the specific detail they want to be released, Chris Davies, it is things like data on arrest rates and prisoner status by nationality and immigration status, data on the sentencing of foreign nationals, including how many are repeat offenders, data on spending programs such as the Refugee Integration Loan Scheme, data on welfare claims by nationality and immigration status. I mean, it's astonishing that isn't made available to us now.
Information is power, Dan. That's the reality of it. And when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the laissez-faire approach that Labour have, it is only going in one direction, a bit like the boats. They never go back. They only keep on arriving. And until such time as we deploy the Navy in the English Channel, we turn the boats around, those that do arrive are automatically deported and will never be given leave to remain in the United Kingdom. This will continue. Jasmine's absolutely right. This is a problem across the developed world. And why is that? The United Nations has been captured by a communist, Antonio Guterres. He's absolutely signed up to the World Economic Forum agenda, around Agenda 2030, around food, around the farmers, all of this stuff. It's all happening deliberately. This is all planned. There is nothing new here. It's such a shame that Sunak finally found his inner politician finally on budget day when it was all too late.
Too little, too late. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Too little, too late. But the thing
and
is,
we can only hope, Dan, that we get a leader of the opposition. And I suspect, unfortunately for you, you're going to be disappointed in your pursuit of Robert Jenrick. I also would prefer Jenrick of the two. But whoever it is, let's just hope that we get a leader of the opposition that galvanises and really begins to push back, because it can't all be done. The heavy lifting can't be done by the 5 MPs of Reform.
well, Baden Oxall talk, though. That's my issue. She's all talk, no action.
100%.
And she proved that when she was in power. Look, breaking right now, Neil Oliver's future at GB News is now under threat after the station was sanctioned by the Ofcommunists with a £100,000 fine this week, a fine that the broadcaster is challenging in court. But viewers who have adored Neil's free speech and campaigning journalism on a whole host of issues related to globalism and COVID and farming have been very disturbed not to see the Coast Guy live on screen. In fact, his show has disappeared from schedules for a number of weeks now. And Neil has been relegated to making clips from his home. Now, what is this about? Well, there's certainly an overall move at GB News to enter into the mainstream. And we've seen loads of examples of it, including the most fawning interview with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Thieves. And when you watch this, and by the way, Chris Hope, who's conducting the interview, he's a very lovely man. I like him a lot. But he's a Westminster guy. And he's mates with these people. And unfortunately, this interview did GB News viewers who are absolutely disgusted by the socialist hell that Thieves has just unleashed in the budget, it did them no favours. Watch.
Rachel Reeves, thank you for joining us tonight on GB News. How did it feel being the first female Chancellor ever to do your budget?
Well, I felt a huge pride in being the first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer. This role has existed now for 800 years and never a woman has done it. And to stand there at dispatch box and I hope send a signal to young women and girls that there should be no ceiling on their ambitions. To smash that glass ceiling, yeah, it's a big deal and I'm proud to have done it.
And that's the limit on your ambition, or is there one more job you want in government, the bigger job?
I've always wanted to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. I think that's everyone knows that. I started my career as an economist at the Bank of England. I worked in the private sector in financial services after that.
Yes.
This is a job that I've always wanted to do, and it's great to finally be here, even in quite challenging circumstances.
Well, the first thing he should have said is, hang on a moment. You weren't an economist at the Bank of England. Guido Fawkes has revealed this week you're actually working in the complaints department and you've lied on your CV for months. Then he should have said, I'm sorry, before we talk about your despicable budget, which has destroyed growth, which has smashed business owners, which has completely ruined the livelihoods of farmers, potentially forever. Before we talk about that, did you know about Axel Rudakubana and the charges against him? Did you know about the Southport Massacre cover-up? And if not, did you ask the Prime Minister? Did you ask the Home Secretary about it? Now, she probably wouldn't have answered, but that's what you call doing your job. And GB News, unfortunately, has now entered into the mainstream. But Chris Davies, I know you've been a big supporter of Mark Steyn, of course, with his battles with the Ofcommunists. What have you heard about what's going on with Neil Oliver, who isn't on holiday, but is no longer on the GB News schedule?
Dan, Neil has been successively marginalised within GB News by moving him off live broadcasting and onto a pre-recorded YouTube and then a pre-recorded show, to now reduced to literally clips from home, and they are not much more than clips rather than a full programme. You know, the expression look after your talent, Neil is comfortably one of the best presenters that GB News could ever have hoped to have get their hands on. And as they did with you, as they did with Mark Steyn, with Calvin Robinson, with Lawrence Fox, with Colin Brazier, they're allowing sand to slip through their fingers. But this is deliberate. One can only assume that he is dying a death by 1,000 cuts. No question. Neil is an intelligent, articulate man. He's also been extremely gracious. He hasn't come out negatively against GB News. There may have been the odd cryptic tweet, but nothing that would even hint seriously that there is a fissure, a fracture of that relationship. But that is the truth of it. That relationship looks now to be deader than dead.
Well, the thing is, look at what I've done. I actually think Neil Oliver would thrive in the independent media space. I know he's been spending time with Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand. And actually, my advice to Neil, I saw him a few weeks ago, would be get out, spread your wings. Don't allow yourself to be treated this terribly. Now, Jasmine, you were a regular on Neil Oliver's show. Do you know what's happened?
No, as you say, I was a regular. I was on every month, pretty much. And in fact, I was booked to do one in September, one in October, one in November. And in September, the day before I was supposed to, I just got an email saying, sorry, because of technical issues, we're not running the program. And then I heard nothing after that. So I just assumed that it wasn't going to carry on. I feel that Neil has been treated appallingly. As you say, he is one of the best presenters and certainly one of the most popular. And it makes no sense to me to kill your golden goose just because he happens to be an actual truth teller. He's brave. He's extremely courageous. He's extremely knowledgeable. I love listening to his historical information that he brings into his monologue and also to many of the discussions. He has been brave enough to bring in all sorts of truth tellers on all sorts of subjects. And one of the few who actually has given voice to people who were harmed by the COVID vaccine and by other vaccines or by other medical problems. He's amazing. And to me, it's utter foolishness to get rid of them. I assume it's because of the Ofcommunists, as you say, they're so afraid of them. But I can't imagine that they are keeping many of their viewers because so many loved what he did and they loved the free speech element of GB News. And that's pretty much gone now.
Well, it has, unfortunately, because as soon as you make the point to your presenters, if you step out of line, you're gone. There's no excuses. There's no second chances. You're gone if you step out of line. Unfortunately, most people in the mainstream media want the paycheck. And Neil has never been prepared to censor himself. He won't do it. So even when, for example, GB News signed Boris Johnson, although Boris Johnson has now seemingly pulled out, has never appeared on the channel. He was meant to be there for US election night, for example, coming on Tuesday. Instead, he's going to be on woke Channel 4. So that's obviously all fallen apart. But Neil went on that week and criticised Boris Johnson because he will not be silenced. But what's happened now, and you've seen it this week, is that the presenters are told, don't say anything about the Southport Massacre. So they don't. So they don't write anything about it. They don't talk about it. And unfortunately, Chris, I lose respect for those people.
Well, Dan, I think the technical issues that Jasmine referred to is, one, the fact that Neil is a truth teller. And GB News now has an increasingly uncomfortable relationship with the truth, unless it is mainstream approved. And GB News really has lost the plot. When this channel started, like you were obviously instrumental in its launch. We on the right of British politics had high hopes that at last there was a voice for ordinary people outside of the mainstream media that would be, and they called themselves the free speech champions. It just isn't the case anymore. I'm not saying it was ever as full fat as I would like it to be, but even at a semi-skimmed level, it was better than what you got on the mainstream media. And I got behind GB News quite considerably. I wasn't a regular in the way that Jasmine was, but I did appear from time to time on, I think it was Nana Okoye's show. But now GB News has completely lost its way. It's sold itself out. It's actually lost its reason to exist through what they're doing. And the technical issues extend, as I understand it, Dan, to the fact that when Neil did make the journey down, on at least one occasion, the studio wasn't even prepped properly.
Yes.
So therefore, why on earth would he bother? He doesn't need to. He will make far more money, which is not his motivating driver, as I understand it, on the independent media, doing his own thing, than he will ever make at GB News, and he will retain his credibility and his integrity.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And Chris, I saw, and in fact, I read it on the show yesterday, but I really enjoyed your tweet on this, because you said, for the umpteenth time, a lesson in not appeasing the crocodile, hoping you'll get eaten last. And Jasmine, I think that is such an important point, because I believe GB News has made a strategic mistake here. I never signed up to this idea of, because they were constantly saying, oh, it's so great that we're regulated by Ofcom. We love the fact we're regulated. We embrace it. Now, I never signed up to that. I think Ofcom should be abolished. The Ofcommunists are disgusting. Why on earth is there a government-owned Ministry of Truth deciding that it's acceptable for one type of interview to go ahead? For example, Ed Balls being able to interview his wife, the Home Secretary, but it's not acceptable for two Conservative MPs to interview another Conservative MP. Surely this just needs to be down to the market. But the problem is GB News claimed that they embraced this sort of regulation. They threw Mark Stein under the bus. They threw Lawrence Fox under the bus. They threw me under the bus. There's others, by the way, that have not been so public, but Colin Brazier, Alex Phillips, Dominic Frisby. These were the great minds that made GB News what it was. And there's other people leaving. Andrew Doyle, who hosted their show Free Speech Nation, is the next to leave. There's a complete exodus.
Yes, and I hear from one producer who will remain nameless that essentially they've brought in quite a few producers and presenters, whatever, from Sly TV, from ITV, particularly from Good Morning Britain, ironically, and that everybody has been told that they have to watch what they put on social media. So, already, even the stuff that they put on social media, maybe, at 10 o'clock at night, and they've had a few, they have to be very careful what they say. And another thing that I've just remembered, when I was the last Neil Oliver I was on, the producer, who's about 12, was had a bit of an edit of his monologue, saying that they'd fact-checked it on one of those fact-checking sites. Now, this is they said that he couldn't say that something it was something that everybody knows is true to do with the Ukraine war, that Janet Yellen had even admitted that about going into Ukraine, and in the fact-checking sites, which as is full of lies, it said that wasn't true, but he knew it. He's an historian. He's reading the news. I knew it just as somebody who reads the news. But they went, no, you can't say it because the fact-checking site is...
Oh my goodness. I remember having an argument once about Full Fact, saying, of course they say what I'm saying is not true, because they're completely captured. There was this great tweet from Colin Brazier, post on X, I should say. He was referring to the complete hypocrisy of the Ofcommunists. And he wrote, I worked in TV news for decades and still think ITV's decision to allow Ed Balls to interview his wife about an important matter of state simply astonishing. Did nobody, him, her, the producers, think it corrosive of trust? Ofcom's subsequent punishment of GB News seems demented. And the problem is, you see on screen now the terror. And there was a really ridiculous example this week when Andrew Bridgen was on the channel to talk about Tommy Robinson. And as soon as he raised some other issues, I think they were all completely valid, you see a complete freak out from the gallery, which is then passed on to the presenters who immediately try to wrap up. But it ends in the most bizarre defense of Hugh Edwards. Watch this.
Video.
I haven't watched the video, Andrew, no.
Well, I really suggest you watch it, see the quality of the journalism, the quality of the undercover investigation, interviewing the headmaster of the school in question, who says that they've been paid money to keep quiet. They've all signed NDAs and taken £10,000 to stay quiet. Nothing reported in the mainstream media. And yes, and you know from the House of Commons, there's many things that the House of Commons don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about Peter Lynch and the death of a 61-year-old grandfather. They don't want to talk about Tommy Robinson. They don't want to talk about excess deaths. They don't want to talk about the vaccine arms. They don't want to talk about the WHO.
Andrew,
and they're not even going to talk now about the European Defence and Securities Union.
Yeah, but let's go back to the point here. He pleaded guilty in court yesterday to contempt of court.
He did release the film. Yes, he breached that.
So he broke the law. He pleaded guilty. He's been sent to prison. Isn't that the right thing?
We should all be under the law, but should the law also be applied equally? What about Hugh Edwards?
All right. Andrew, we're straying off the point. Andrew, you've had your point. You've had your say. That's Andrew Bridgen, the former independent MP. He cites really strong views and feelings, but at the end of the day, he pleaded guilty to contempt of court, and the judge has sent him to prison for 18 months.
And of course, there'll be many people watching who think that what Tommy Robinson is trying to do in the things he's trying to expose is worthwhile thing. But the things that he is standing up for, the foundation of this country is the rule of law. Yeah. And if you break the law, especially if you plead guilty, then obviously going to prison is what happens.
We weren't shutting Andrew Bridgen down, but Andrew Bridgen was now going to introduce Hugh Edwards into this. Hugh Edwards did not break the law. He may have behaved inappropriately.
Well, he did. He just didn't receive a prison sentence. He was found in possession of child abuse.
He did break the law, and it was appalling. But I still...
It's a different crime.
It's a different crime. This was involved, and contempt of court for judges is a very, very serious issue. It always has been. And
I mean, Chris, Jasmine, this is what happens. This is what happens when you try and cover things up, when you try and stop discussions. I mean, what on earth was that defence of Hugh Edwards about?
It was shocking, wasn't it? Sorry, Karen.
Jasmine, I give way.
No, I was just saying, it's amazing to say that the courts are particularly unhappy about, one basic crime, but seriously, but don't seem to be that bothered about paedophilia. So contempt of court is a bigger problem than paedophilia. It is gobsmacking, frankly.
What did you make of it, Chris?
Well, I thought the funny part of it for me. And I know where Jasmine's going with paedophilia. It's child sex abuse, to give it its full name, which is obviously horrific. But what amused me was the way in which you could just see on his face the pure fear. And then the defence that he came out with was bizarre. And Miriam Cates looked at him as though he'd just shot Bambi. She couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. And of course, when she challenged him, he fluffed his lines and eventually admitted that actually, yes, a crime had been committed, but it didn't result in a criminal sentence. I mean, the ridiculous thing in all this is, why have someone like Andrew Bridgen on if you're worried about someone going off piece?
Well, it'll never be on again. I'm pretty convinced of that, because TV News has a long list of people who are just banned.
Absolutely. And what I don't understand, Dan, and the one thing I would say about Tommy Robinson, which I believe we may be coming on to talk about shortly, is why no one has mentioned that Tommy has been sentenced to 18 months in a maximum security prison for a civil offence, not a criminal offence, whereas Hugh Edwards' offence was criminal. Absolutely criminal, the worst form of criminal.
And he doesn't spend a day inside. He doesn't spend a day inside. I know, it's extraordinary. Well, actually, look, do stand by, Chris Davies and Jasmine Birtles, because we have a couple of major updates on the Tommy Robinson story. So, firstly, his life in Belmarsh. One of his best friends has just posted a major update. We'll bring you that. Plus, a big row has broken out within Reform UK over Tommy Robinson. So, talking about that in just 1 minute. Don't go anywhere. But first, us men want our grooming routine to be a one and done deal. So the days of using the same trimmer for all parts of your body are over thanks to our friends at Manscaped. I've come up with the ultimate package to keep your hairs trimmed from 12 till 6. Introducing the Beard and Balls bundle featuring the Lawnmower 5.0 and the Beard Hedger. Now, I'm not talking about a traditional lawnmower, but this product provides precision trimming for all areas, even the sensitive ones, to get them as manicured as freshly cut grass. This trimmer gets it right the first time, being gentle on the skin and all your delicate places with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. You can choose between a precise trim or a smooth finish. And did I mention it's waterproof, so you can trim in the shower and avoid making a mess everywhere. Perfect for those of us who appreciate efficiency. Next, let's talk about the Beard Hedger. Whether you're going for a neat stubble or a full-on lumberjack look, this trimmer has you covered, featuring a titanium-coated stainless steel T-blade and 20 length options. You can achieve any style you want with just a twist of the zoom wheel. And just like the lawnmower, the Beard Hedger is also waterproof, so you can handle your beard grooming right in the sink or shower without worrying about water damage. With up to 60 minutes of runtime and an LED charge indicator, you'll never be caught mid-trim with a dead battery. It's genuinely such a gentle product. I use it. No more cuts. It's reduced the risk of ingrown hairs and grooming accidents. Now, you'll keep your loved one happy with this too, because it's a perfect gift for the man in your life. Today, 20% off and free shipping. All you have to do is use the code Outspoken. The website address is www.manscaped.com. You'll receive 20% off your entire order and free shipping. All you need to do is enter the word Outspoken at checkout. www.manscaped.com. No more juggling multiple tools or dealing with subpar results, just efficient, effective grooming wherever you need it. For the premium grooming experience, trust Manscaped. But now, back to the show. And a major row has broken out within Reform UK over Tommy Robinson. It in part spawns from an interaction on this show featuring Howard Cox, a senior figure in the party, criticising the deputy leader, Richard Tice, for saying this to Camilla Tominey on GB News.
Tommy Robinson, people have been protesting in his name. What do you make of Tommy Robinson? Is he a good guy in your eyes?
No. All of that lot, we have nothing to do with them.
Even the protesters who have got banners up saying two-tier care, you agree with them on the policing and justice?
We agree with ourselves. I'm not aligning ourselves with Tommy Robinson's lot in any shape or form.
Now, the mainstream media has picked up on this row after Howard Cox, who was the Reform UK candidate for the London mayoralty and also stood in Dover for them at the most recent general election, really well-regarded guy because, of course, he runs the Fair Fuel campaign as well, and he revealed that Nigel Farage was not happy with Richard's comments. What?
Fortunately, Richard Tice did actually, he was questioned by Camilla Tominey. And he asked this question, what do you think of Tommy Robinson? And Richard came back and said, well, I've got nothing to do with Tommy Robinson or his lot. Well,
that lot.
With respect, it's a bit sad because Richard, I'm a good friend of Richard and we're close. But that was wrong. It was uninformed. And Nigel even texted. Yeah, it was absolutely right. And, I'm one of that lot.
Sorry, what did you say Nigel said, Howard? You just cut out briefly.
Yeah, Nigel actually did contact me privately. And he just simply said that Richard went over the top. I think it'll all die down. And deep down, I think Richard's got to come out. And that's my feeling. I love him to death, but I think he's got to come out and clarify what he really meant. Because he was actually saying he was against thuggery and violence. That's what he should have said. But most of the people, 99% of the people, and all of these thing are just concerned about getting our country back.
Yes, and a great people. So many people at that march watch this show every day, and I think language is so important, Howard, isn't it? So really interesting row breaking out within Reform UK. Fascinating, wasn't it, Chris Davies, that Howard Cox said, I'm part of that lot. That's me. And the problem is you've got a lot of Reform UK supporters who were on these marches. Remember, these marches were peaceful, very different to a whole load of the hard left marches we've seen in London in recent months. And look, I really like Richard Tice too. I think Howard is probably right, though, that he needs to clarify his comments, because when he came on Outspoken recently, this is Richard Tice during the Reform UK conference, he did make it clear, Chris, that simply attending one of these marches would not see you banned from Reform UK.
Well, it's interesting. I've been following Rupert Lowe on X, and he certainly, when Tommy Robinson was detained, wanted the prison service and the governor of the prison that he was in, I believe he may now have moved, and you will know better than me, but at Belmarsh, to make sure that Tommy was properly looked after and was not subjected to undue risk and danger. Now, I thought that was quite interesting because given Tice's comments and Farage's past comments in relation to Tommy, I thought that was quite a politically brave thing for Rupert to do. I mean, Rupert has the advantage that I think he's one of those people that he's always going to say what he feels, regardless of whatever the whip is in front of him, in this case, the reform whip. He's not somebody that's going to shut up quietly. But I'm not surprised that this has caused such unrest within reform because it has not played well. I believe a number of members have resigned their position within reform as members. I think it's pushed quite a few noses out of joint on a regional level as well. And therefore, you know, from the point of view of me personally as a member of UKIP, I'm delighted because UKIP have benefited from this. They've had a number of people join as a direct result of Tice's comments. But in terms of the direction of travel for reform, they need to be so careful not to just become part of the political establishment that they claim to be trying to smash.
Where do you stand on this one, Jasmine?
Well, yes, it's an interesting one because as you know, I run a Substack called News Uncut.
Yes, I appeared recently. It's brilliant. Everyone should be following it. I recommend it on my Substack.
Oh, marvellous. And I actually interviewed Andrew Bridgen a week or so ago, and he mentioned that he was going to be speaking at the Tommy Robinson rally. And I said, oh, Tommy Robinson's quite a controversial figure. And he then explained that he's done a lot of good and that I should, as he mentioned on GB News, that I should watch the documentary. And I said I would. I haven't yet, but I will. I genuinely will. And I think when I saw Richard Tice's comment, I immediately went, oh no, because firstly, you can't just dismiss somebody like that. I mean, because you do need to see what he's done and what he's saying. And we've seen over the last 4 years, particularly, lots of very good people just dismissed completely. I mean, I've been dismissed, just branded a this and a that. And life is not like that, but everybody has goods and bads. So it's silly to just dismiss him and to say that lot are all, lump them all together in some sort of dodgy garbage kind of umbrella, like Joe Biden's done with Trump supporters, millions and millions and millions of people. That is really not clever, really not. So clearly I think this was fear. It was fear on his part that reform would be tainted, if you like, if they said, oh yes, we like Tommy Robinson, we think he's a great guy. But you have to be balanced in what you're saying. You could say he's quite a controversial figure. He has some good things to say, but he's on a different path to reform, something like that, which frankly would be more truthful actually. And I think reform people would accept that as being honest. They might not like it, but they might think, well, at least that's honest. But to just dismiss everybody as that lot, useless lot, don't like them, that's just dumb, frankly.
Yeah, there has to be a change. I think there has to be a change. The Overton window is shifting. And the thing is, there is a change coming in British politics. I mean, breaking right now, this is extraordinary. According to the I newspaper and BMG research, the Conservatives are now actually leading Labour in the polls, despite not having a leader, 29% compared to 28%. But there's Reform at 17%. And look at what happened last night in a Wolverhampton council by-election. Look at that swing. Reform up 34.8, Labour down 38%. And Reform actually won. They took the council. So there is a massive change coming, but it is important that the right stays united. Now, speaking of Tommy Robinson, lots of concerns about the fact that he is in Belmarsh prison and about his safety. Ezra Levent from Rebel News, who is funding Tommy's legal fees, incredibly concerned, and launched a campaign to try and target the woke governor of Belmarsh, effectively saying to her, if anything happens to Tommy, there will be blood on your hands. What?
Tommy has been in Belmarsh prison before, but the previous prison governor put Tommy in a special unit called the contingency suites, where no other prisoners had access to him. It was the same prison within a prison where Julian Assange was held. Now, it's psychologically damaging to be in solitary confinement like that for so long, but at least Tommy was allowed visitors, and he knew he wouldn't be attacked. But this new prison warden, she's a diversity hire named Jenny Lewis. She gave Tommy two choices when he arrived: be thrown into the general population of the prison, where he would be killed by jihadist gangs, or to be locked up in a tiny cell down the block, as they say, for 23 and a half hours a day. But being put down the block is a punishment, usually reserved for violent prisoners who engage in misconduct while in prison. It's not a permanent holding cell meant for long-term use. According to a recent government inspection of Belmarsh, the average length of time a prisoner is being punished down the block is 18 days. Tommy was sentenced to 18 months. No one could survive that, but that's what this woke prison governor was threatening to do.
And today, Tommy's good friend, who you may know, Gurmit Singh, went to visit Tommy in Belmarsh, and this is what he had to say afterwards.
No, the governor's been back down and said that you'll be staying on the segregation, whatever it's called, the contingency suites. You won't be going on to the main block. There's some other sick individuals just across the road from him. You've got the Southport killer, he's up in healthcare. You've got the bloke that murdered the soldier recently, he's up in healthcare. Obviously all Islamic jihadists, but was hidden from the public. But yeah, so that's how it is. And right now, I've got another 4-hour drive home, so I'm going to make a move. And when I do go visit him every week, I will keep you all updated. And yeah, but thank you for the support. Obviously, there's no reason to email the governor anymore. She's been inundated with emails. So none of that. He's safe, he's secure, he's in the best circumstance he can be. And watch out for his Twitter.
But now there's been quite a significant update in the past hour, because Gurmit Singh has now tweeted, news just in, after a perfect morning, Belmarsh has moved Tommy to the block in Woodhull. Very dangerous and suspicious. They must have moved him the second I left. And this has now just been confirmed by Tommy Robinson's administration on X, saying Tommy has been told all communications sent to him while he was an HMP Belmarsh will have to be forwarded to Woodhill. So Chris Davies, so he said, so he's confused. They also say Tommy is still confused why, as a Category C civil defender, he has been put in high security prison down the block for at least 14 days. At Belmarsh, he had a regime, exercise time, open visits, and was reassured all would be okay. Right now, he has none of that. He was lied to. Tommy has been stitched up. He has been forced to move on to the block of punishment section of the prison. He has been given no reason for his forced move after reassurances were made at Belmarsh. This is an atrocious abuse of power designed to break Tommy mentally and put his life in danger. This despicable treatment needs to be stopped right now. So, quite worrying, Chris, that they seem to be playing cat and mouse with exactly where Tommy's going to be and over his safety. What do you make of it?
Dan, I think it's a disgrace. I come back to what I said earlier on about this being a civil offence. Tommy should be in an open prison. That's the reality of it. Contempt of court, contrary to what Andrew Pearce has to say, contempt of court is not a serious offence. It is not a criminal offence. It is a civil offence. It should not result in him being in a high security prison. It should not result in him being in segregation. And it should not result in him being at risk of his life. This is purely because of the person rather than the crime. And there is no doubt in my mind that this is politics at work. there is a conspiracy here that we will never know, absolutely never know. If you think we can't find out about when the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister knew about the ricin and everything that Axel Rudakubana had, there is no way we will ever be able to prove this. But I fear the dark hand of the deep state behind this. I am extremely worried for Tommy.
Jasmine, what's your view?
Yes, I agree. I'm just thinking of Julian Assange. I was outside the courts of justice when his case was being argued. And, these are people who are truth tellers, really. I mean, whether other people believe that what they say is truth or not, as far as they are concerned, this is truth. And they should not be put into Belmarsh. They should not be put into solitary confinement. I mean, I'd like to know how many people Tommy Robinson has killed, how many he's raped, how many bombs he's placed. What has he done that should put him in a maximum security prison, same one as as we said as Julian Assange, and be put into solitary confinement? It is government, it is Marxism, and it's part of the authoritarian state that puts what you say above actual, genuine physical crimes in terms of importance.
And Chris,
it's no
I
coincidence, Dan, is it, that he's in the same prison as Axel Rudakubana? So to use the direct comparison that Jasmine has made there, a potential triple murderer, we've got to give him the benefit of the doubt. Yes, he's entitled to a trial, but a potential murderer, a potential terrorist is in the same prison as someone for contempt of court. It is beyond a joke. It is insidious at best.
Yeah, I mean, Woodhill in particular is a really worrying sort of prison. Charles Bronson had a punch up with a murderer there. In May, a staff shortage was reported. And a couple of years ago, there was an inmate who was found dead, Anil Gill, because the staff made insufficient checks on him. There's also a recent suicide where a jury found that failure by Woodhill to learn from previous suicides caused the death by neglect of Daniel Dunkley. So, given the fact that there are all of these concerns over Tommy Robinson's safety, the fact that he's ended up in Woodhill is quite something.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to come up with any other conclusion that this is deliberate. It's in order to put off anybody who follows Tommy, or anybody who would like to say the same sort of things, or anybody who would like to say any truth, frankly, so that, as you mentioned, we turn rather like the Germans, where they're self-censoring as well as being censored by the state. And Tommy, because he's a big character, he's a big name, everybody's watching him and thinking, oh, golly, well, if that's what happens if you just open your mouth a bit, I better keep mine closed. That does seem to be the point here, is to shut the rest of us up.
No, indeed. Really, really disturbing times. But it's been so good to have you both here this Friday. Thank you so much to Chris Davies of True Conservative Media, Money Magpie, Jasmine Birtles, but you have to check out the News Uncut Substack. I recommend it on the Outspoken Substack so you can see it there. Have a brilliant weekend, you too. But we're still going, because in the after show, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are under increasing strain ahead of a potential Donald Trump return to the White House. I reveal original reporting, and then American royal expert and Trump supporter Lee Cohen is going to analyse www.outspoken.live. You can register to watch us there. Of course, we are back live every weekday, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe right now on YouTube and Rumble. Most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. Hope to see you on the after show in just one moment. Otherwise, have an amazing weekend.